talking with Jay and Larry about how sponsorship has been so important to bass fishermen, Jay, you were just talking about when you were coming in to the sport, you really didn't have much to go on.
No, and nobody does really when you're just starting out, unless you've got a sugar daddy.
Yeah.
Somebody that your dad or your uncle or somebody that wants to pay your way. But most guys, like Larry and I, both started on our own and sleeping in our truck and just saving everywhere you could, saving pennies here and there, and yeah, we couldn't do what we do without sponsors. Nobody wins enough money annually to pay all the bills. You have great years where you can get by in your winnings, but then you have years where you don't catch them that good.
Right.
So but that's what it's all about when we help with the marketing out. All these manufacturers with marketing in the bass fishing industry, and really tournaments have been a great place for product innovation and marketing. Winning tournaments on a lure it's a big deal. It really drives sales and stuff. So boats and motors and a lot of new products are tested and brought out in the tournament scene. And so, but yeah, I started out without any sponsors, and gosh, I remember one of my first sponsors was when I was out west fishing was Gary Yamamoto actually sponsored me. I used his rods. He had rods and soft plastics and stuff, and started real small with. I remember after I had that string of success, I remember Rich Tauber came to me and he said, "Hey, are you interested in being on the Skeeter team next year?" Because when I graduated from college, I just bought a boat. I had started out in a Ranger 360, but I wasn't sponsored by Ranger. I just bought it,
Right.
And I got a loan from my dad for that boat, and I paid him back that first year with some of my winnings from all those tournaments. And so I bought my boat, but Rich Tauber came and said, "Hey, the Skeeter team's interested in hiring you because you're doing so great." And back then, Larry was on the Skeeter team was bad to the bone back then. I mean, it was like you and Clun and John Dean and Rich Tauber, Gary Klein,
Torian,
White Shoes Torian,
Harold Allen.
I mean, it was the Hemphill gang, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, yeah, I'd like to be a part of that deal. Remember those black Dodge vans?
Oh, yeah.
Remember those, the Skeeter team deal that we had for? I mean, that was back in the '80s,
Yep.
And so anyway, we did that. That was one of my first sponsors, and then Mercury came along, and Maxima Fishing Line. But I mean, Daiwa. I remember Team Daiwa was a big deal back then. I remember Larry was on that, and Clun, Guido, and a bunch. That was a big deal back then. They really did a lot of
big deal.
That was a big deal. And I got a part on with Kurt and Glenn Oshima. Yeah, they hired me $100 a month, man, with Daiwa and all the product you needed. I thought I was in heaven, So I was 22 years old, but that's how you start. You start out just small, and then as your career builds, and they look at you as a good investment for, and hopefully, you pay for potential. The sponsors do when a guy's young, and then when your career finally blossoms on the national scene, and then you finally start getting compensated for your value once you start winning like the Classic or a National Angler of the Year title or whatever.
Right.
But it takes that sort of success, winning the Cup, the Bass or FLW Angler of the Year, winning the Classic, something like that to really make the highest level of sponsorships. And very few guys ever get there, but it's still you can still, there's a lot of non-endemic companies that people tap into now that help sponsor them. There's several guys that fish today that have guys that cut sponsors from outside the fishing industry that foot their bill. So it's a grind and a challenge, but it can also be a good time. And I've had good times and bad times. We've had some long-term sponsors that would change. They get new marketing people in there, and they decide they're going to go a different direction. And I lost a couple sponsors when I switched from Bass to FLW that I'd been with, like Berkeley, for 20 years. Larry was on that deal too, and they just decided they sold. It's a family-owned business, and Tom Bedell and Berkeley Bedell started it, then Tom ran it. Tom sold it to Jardin Corporation, and they brought in a bunch of new young marketing guys and that didn't know me and Larry from Joe Blow on the street.
Yeah.
And they decided they didn't want to sponsor anybody on FLW, so they just let us go. And so it was. So stuff like that happens too. It's not all a bed of roses, you know.
Right.
Things that can happen that are out of your
Nothing
control.
stays the same.
That's
Right.
Is the only
You know,
constant.
one of the biggest questions I get asked from young fishermen is, you know, how do you get sponsorships? Plain and simple, you win. You win. You get good, you get consistent, and you show that potential that in a year, 2, 3 down the road that you might win a Bassmasters Classic, or you may win the FLW Cup, or you may win Angler of the Year. That's how you get sponsors. And you grow as you do better or as you win. I mean, if they want to use you in advertisement, they'll pay you a little more money. And this, you know, but you got to be a winner any way you look at it. You're not going to get somebody to go out there and pay your entry fees and give you gas money and all that before you win tournament.
Yep.
It just ain't going to happen. And consistency to me is the most important thing. You look at a guy like Jay, he was in the money so consistent every tournament. You know, he'd win a check, he'd push the winner, he'd finish second, or he'd get close. Well, you knew it's just a matter of time he's going to win. And it was the same with me. The very first year, by finishing second in the Classic, you know, I thought it was going to be something was going to happen. Well, not really. If it hadn't been for Ricky Clun, I wouldn't have got one nickel of sponsorship out of that Classic.
Oh, really?
And Ricky had been around me a little bit, and he knew who I was, and he knew everything. I mean, Ricky knew me very well. And he said, look, he said, you want to run a glass drum boat next year? They'll pay our entry fee and give us $600. I said, they'll how much? $600 for each tournament. That's a lot of expense money.
Yeah.
I said, you bet I'll run one. And so me and Ricky got a deal, and it lasted 2 years. It was short-lived. They were a ski boat company, but, you know, that's just one more step into Skeeter.
Sure.
And after 2 more years, you know, then I was winning a little money, and then we got a deal with Skeeter, and, you know, but that's how you got to do it. You got to win.
Right. Right. What are the money is, comparatively speaking, obviously the money back then was a lot lower for sponsorships and stuff like that. But if you compare it to today's, is it roughly
The value of that money back then was just as good as it is right now. $600 a month deal back then is like $1,000 or $1,200 a month.
Yeah.
With inflation and expenses, it was a lot of money.
Yeah.
You could go to Florida on $100.
Yeah, gas.
Tank of gas was
Gas is
$18.
$3.50 now. So yeah,
I mean, you can make the whole trip on $100. Room was 21 or 29 or whatever.
Yep.
Big. I mean, it's, you know, from that year to now, it's about the same. Now there's a lot more money to be made nowadays if you're a big winner.
Right.
You know, if you was to have one of them monster years,
like Jason Christie's had
You-
last
you-
year. You know, he won 3 or 4 tournaments, and the purses are so big now that if you have one of those monster year or 2 runs like you had in the 80s and I had in the 90s or 02 or whatever, you could stand win a big bucks now. So, you know, $500,000 in winnings.
and plus you get your sponsorships. If you was to really get hot right now, you could really make some money in sponsorships. I mean, it's young kids right now. The opportunity is still there, but you got to be a Kevin Van Dam, or you got to get hot and stay hot for a period of time. Then you can name your own price.
Well, he's really the only guy that's been able to. Kevin's like our Tiger Woods, you know.
That's exactly right.
He's-
You know, there's not room but for so many Tiger Woods in fishing.
There's people watching. You know, very few of those will become the next Van Dam. But there's a lot of guys watching your show that might be able to make a living at it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and the thing of it is, the fishing industry, I know you'd agree with this, it's really a pretty small family. I mean, everybody knows everybody. And one of the biggest things about getting good sponsors is just being a part of the family, just having a good reputation and doing the right thing. And, you know, and because everybody knows it's just it's a small industry. It really is.
You don't want to get
No,
anybody
and so
mad
that's
or anything
important.
like
Yeah,
that.
for the young guys coming up, it's important when you're on the water even, and you just want to get a good reputation. You don't want to cut people off or jump somebody's hole, or because it's the industry's so small, word really gets around, but there's a lot of great people, man. It's the best industry in the world. The fishing industry's full of wonderful wonderful folks. It's the best part about it.
That's right.
Well, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Good. That was
Absolutely.
awesome.